Hello, my name is Muwata Green, and I'm your host for the Plebeian View podcast. The Plebeian View podcast aims to be a leading voice in ideas in creating a fair and equitable world where all people are entitled to life, liberty, and happiness. Like the forest. Welcome to the Plebeian View podcast for October 2021. I want to apologize that we wasn't with you last month of September. We had some technical editing problems and wasn't able to get the podcast out. But going forward, every month, the first weekend of the month, we're going to have out our podcast. Domestic Violence Month is very personal and professional to me. Briefly, my history of domestic violence is when I grew up. My mother was in a domestic violence relationship, and I experienced that as a young teenager, which made me very angry and wanted to strike back at the abuser and really hurt them. And my second thing around domestic violence, and the most longest, was being an EMS worker in New York City with FDNY for over 26 years, where I responded to domestic violence of many sorts and types, and how it was handled, how it was even handled by the police in an incorrect way, where the police just told the abuser just to leave the house, and sometimes try to convince the person that was abused not to file a report. So the system doesn't always work like it should, and that is a big part of the problem. Domestic violence is a serious, serious issue, and we must look at it that way. We're going to look at domestic violence, and I'm going to talk briefly about the connection to patriarchy. For those who are not familiar with patriarchy, patriarchy is the male supremacy role in relationships. Because men supposed to be men, they feel and act out, and the society backs them up, that they should be dominant in relationships rather than equal, and everybody has their role. No one tells the other one what to do, but you come to collaboration. It's like a team effort. But patriarchy, which is a product of capitalism, that's like racism, always has a hierarchy where somebody's at the top and someone's supposed to give the orders and make all the decisions and so-called benefit from the profits and everything else. So capitalism, the economic system of capitalism, creates these social inequalities from racism and white supremacy, from patriarchy and male supremacy. So we must change the system in order to get rid of these oppressive systems. That's basically what patriarchy is about. Now let's look at a few things about structure inequality. As I said, it poses many barriers for women when they try to leave relationships. Nearly half of all women who are murdered die at the hands of their current or former partners. 70 to 80% of intimate partner homicides, no matter which partner was killed, the man physically abused a woman before the murder. The courts and police offer little protection. The most common response to domestic violence by the police and the courts is a restraining order or a protecting order, a document that identifies the perpetrator as a potential threat to one victim, not to society in general, and instructs the abuser to have no physical or verbal contact with the victim. Though the information is inconclusive, 11% to 25% of women have active restraining orders at the time of their murder. Though there is some evidence of long-term benefit to restraining order, initially is 21% chance of escalating into a violent behavior after an order of protection is issued. Domestic violence abuses are also an option for many. Though domestic abuse shelters are a temporary option for many women and children, women still fear retaliation from their abusers and consequently from the system, a system heavily steeped in patriarchy, a system of society or government in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. That's what I was saying earlier about patriarchy. Gender inequality and reinforcement of patriarchal ideology is demonstrated with the treatment of domestic violence victims by the police, the family, the criminal courts, and the child protective services. This is a serious problem in our society, and it must stop. And the only way for it to stop is us men, heterosexual men, to say we are against this totally, and we are supporting a black feminism and feminism in general against oppression. And I say that as a black male, heterosexual black male, that would stand on the side of women against domestic abuse. And a lot of it just gets unreported. I don't know how else to say this. So, and also there's another controversy about domestic violence. Why doesn't she leave? What are we doing to perpetuate and tolerate objection and subordination of women? It has been consistently demonstrated that men who accept patriarchal belief about gender roles have a higher likelihood of engaging in violence against women. Let me read that again. It has been consistently demonstrated that men who accept a very patriarchal beliefs about gender roles have a higher likelihood of engaging in violence against women. Once again, go back to what I say about the system itself. Until we change the system and the culture, this will continue. I know this has been a very intense, deep podcast, but I want people to understand what is really going on. As we bring this podcast to an end, I want to say in the native language of Kiswahili, Tuta Anana, until we meet again. And please think about what we said, research it, understand your role in changing the world, and change yourself. And I say that specifically to the male gender, who's the main perpetuator of violence and oppression. Until we meet again, Tuta Anana.
Yes. Circling beneath the dark city that stagger on the coastline, and a nation that just can't stand much more. Like the forest buried beneath the highway.